Hey, here's a question. How do you unite the Pokemon fanbase? Is there something you can do that brings together all the different warring factions of people who all have different opinions of what Pokemon should be and where the franchise should go moving forwards? Well, it's almost a trick question, because the reality of the situation is that there likely isn't one single act that can merge a fanbase that is so frequently at each other's throats over petty things, but you can distract them with the right kind of news and potential video game. Last week's Pokemon Presents, a showcase designed to both celebrate the impressive history of a franchise that has stuck around for a quarter of a century and also hint at what the future will bring, was surprisingly eye-opening for what Game Freak and the Pokemon Company want to do with this series. Bizarrely, we're in a situation where the Gen 4 remakes were the supporting act to something far greater and more eye-catching. And considering how long people have been excited to go back to Sinnoh again for remakes, that goes to show the size of the waves made by Pokemon Legends Arceus. Not just a glimpse into the future of Pokemon, but perhaps a signal that Pokemon is undergoing a metamorphosis unlike anything it has ever experienced before. In much the same way that my scalp could use some kind of change to help give it some life, since my hair is disappearing pretty quickly, and I may well join the 2 out of 3 guys who will experience some form of hair loss before they turn 35. But thankfully there may be hope in the future for all of my baldy brethren, which I can only say because this time last year I shaved it all off, because Keeps were kind enough to sponsor this video. Keeps do some damn fine work with helping to restore hair to patchy heads with their FDA-approved treatment for hair loss, and have a ton of examples of successful cases under their belt. Their treatment packages come in 3 different variants based on what you want to focus on, and since it can be shipped directly to your door, you don't have to worry about venturing out into the scary world we live in nowadays. And considering how cheap their treatment is compared to their competitors, it'd be a bad idea to miss out on this. For a limited time offer, you can go to keeps.com/rabbid or click the link in the description to receive 50% off your first order. That's keeps.com/rabbid to receive 50% off your first order. Stop hair loss now before it's too late. Anyway, what was I talking about again? Oh yeah, Pokemon and metamorphosizing like a caterpillar, which in itself is a vital component for explaining why Pokemon Legends Arceus is so important, since Pokemon is potentially the classic Nintendo IP that has struggled the most to break away from its roots. There's nothing inherently wrong with the foundations on which Pokemon has built itself. The 368 million copies of games sold and $90 billion are a testament to its staying power. But I think it's fair to say at this stage that a lot of Pokemon's popularity stems from those early stages, and the lasting impression it left on those who surrounded themselves in Pokemon when they were younger. Pokemon is iconic, with many of its characters being instantly recognizable by even the most indifferent of bystanders, and frankly, all the games that came after its peak towards the end of the 90s and the start of the 2000s are just adding on to this rampant empire, a simple way of maintaining momentum by giving the people more of what they loved before. Pokemon never had to try too hard because of how strong those early games were conceptually. It's like an RPG, but you can choose from over 100 different party members and watch them grow into stronger creatures with enough training. That's a pretty amazing premise. All you need to change is what kind of creatures you're catching and training up, with later games bolting another 100 or so with every new generation so that your choice is even wider, and there's the subtle illusion of progress. Pokemon doesn't go through too many drastic changes, but the roster of available critters gets larger and larger, and suddenly we get to 2019 and we're pushing 900. I remember noticing that the number was getting pretty high when Gen 3 pushed it up to 386, and that was 18 years ago! Genuine progress has been hard to come by, but it's not like Game Freak has completely abandoned any hope of moving Pokemon forward in any significant way. Although it has to be said that any innovation has been done to give each generation a unique feature, like how Gen 6 brought in Mega Evolutions and Gen 7 had Z moves. The changes are typically a lot more subtle than any kind of sweeping alterations to the fundamentals of Pokemon, as if every new generation is a different interpretation of the original formula as set out by Pokemon Red and Blue. These games, by the way, are basically the perfect start for this type of progression within the franchise, since they're characterful enough to bring millions of kids along for the ride and create an entire generation of Pokemon trainers, but they're also rough. Like, seriously rough around the edges. The number of glitches and exploits along with awful game balancing leaves these games feeling a bit underdeveloped at times, but it left Game Freak with an easy path for future games that would iron out glitches and tweak game balance until it's something close to fully optimized. I'd argue that Pokemon wouldn't be as successful with its more recent games if Gen 1 was a completely perfect experience. The fact that this franchise had a place to go that didn't require massive changes allowed Pokemon to build a demographic that doesn't mind all that much if a new game isn't a complete departure from what preceded it. It's a cushy position to be in. But what about now? Pokemon has never strayed too far from controversy, what with all the uproar from Christian extremists in the 90s, but Gen 8 marked a turning point where the source of the dissent was mostly internal, with large parts of the Pokemon franchise struggling with Game Freak's decision to limit the number of Pokemon that would appear in Sword and Shield, which then snowballed into criticism of everything from Pokemon design to world design to the quality of your trees, Game Freak, come on! Working out how good or otherwise these games are is a tricky task that is often clouded because of all the negative comments associated with every tiny decision that Game Freak made, and while there's plenty that I don't like, I can appreciate the work that was put into things like the wild area, and a lot of the Pokemon designs are very creative, and the music slaps so hard, and I really enjoyed the DLC too. It's hardly the big step forward that many were hoping for, considering that it's the first mainline game to ever release on a home console, but the wild area in particular was a very encouraging hint at where Pokemon could go next. You could do away with linear routes that feel too much like corridors and make a whole game that works like the wild area, which was basically the best part of Gen 8. Focus more on the joy of finding and catching Pokemon ahead of trying to conform to the rigidity of classic games. Or, just make it like Breath of the Wild. I mean, I had to bring it up at some point. Not long after Breath of the Wild dropped in early 2017, discussions started over how Nintendo could use ideas from this incredibly successful game to help breathe some new life into tired franchises. Expanding an adventure game like Zelda out to incorporate a wide, expansive overworld isn't much of a stretch since it supports some of the qualities that are already present as part of that genre, but RPGs are more of a challenge, especially those that are still dealing with turn-based combat and random encounters. Sword and Shield marked a turning point away from random encounters, at least since Pokemon now appear on the overworld, a feature borrowed from Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, but a whole game that works and feels like the wild area would be a challenge to make and a slog to play. There's kind of a lot happening in the wild area, you need to tone it down a bit. That's where Breath of the Wild comes in, because that game isn't exactly jam-packed full of shit to do. It's an experience that isn't afraid to let its surroundings keep the player engaged through subtle ambience and environmental storytelling, punctuated with hits of action that juxtapose the quieter moments. This sets it apart from other Zelda games, since most of those have you travelling through the overworld all like... So what does this all mean for Pokemon Legends Arceus, and what can we glean from the trailer that dropped last week? Well, not a lot, because the game is scheduled to release at some point in 2022, and given its size and importance, it may well release towards the back end of that year, which leaves us trying to decipher a trailer for a game that is nearly 2 years away. What do we know for sure? Actually a fair bit, since its title and a lot of narration in the trailer revealed that it's set in Sinnoh, but is more of a prequel set many years before the events of Diamond and Pearl, which would go some way towards explaining the feudal-like design of the town, the metal latches on the Pokeball, and maybe even all the wide open spaces. We could definitely have some kind of open-world Pokemon game in modern day, but then we may run into issues with built-up cities and wackier things like vehicles. I'm not so sure the world is quite ready for Charmander fighting police officers and stealing cars, but for the sequel, who knows? Open-world Pokemon in general is something people have been excited for a long time, even before Breath of the Wild reinvigorated what was, at the time, a bit of a tired concept. The excitement for open-world Pokemon may well be tied to how successful Nintendo adapted Zelda to an open-world environment, but open-world video games themselves have been around for decades. Zelda shifted the focus away from detailed, scripted environments towards a more free-form, interactive world that encourages a more creative playstyle. If Legends Arceus is a true open-world experience, it'd be interesting to see just how much it borrows from Breath of the Wild's more fluid approach to problem-solving. It would make a lot of sense if Game Freak borrowed ideas from one of Nintendo's most critically successful games of recent memory, but especially if it neatly ties back into the overall feel of this new Pokemon game. In the trailer we saw how catching Pokemon may change to be more of an involved experience reliant on stealth and using long grass to get close enough to land your Pokeball. How this would translate to catching more challenging Pokemon like legendaries that famously have awkwardly low catch rates in standard Pokemon games would be fascinating, since I can't imagine lobbing dozens of balls translating well, but then again, catching a legendary in one ball would be a huge anticlimax. It sounds like a problem that Game Freak will have to face head on, since Arceus will definitely play a significant role in this game and may well be catchable at some point, but how do you go about working that kind of mechanic into a game that doesn't clearly lend itself to something this grindy? Also, your trainer can leap into a role, which I'm sure is important. I want to say it'll be useful for getting around, but let's be honest, if Breath of the Wild enlisted horses to speeding up your traversal of this huge world, you have to know that Pokemon would do something similar with its frankly hilariously large roster of animals. This might be something that it looks to Gen 7 for inspiration for, since one of the best changes made in that generation was trading out slow, clunky HMs that take up a move slot for fun, dynamic ride Pokemon so you can traverse rough terrain and move objects using Pokemon in a more visually pleasing way instead of just bumping into stuff. It's hard to tell at this stage if any of those HM-like ride Pokemon will make it into Legends Arceus, or if this game will expand out to give most, if not all Pokemon, some degree of interactivity with the world. You know all those Pokemon that can learn Cut? How about we make all of them able to cut grass in the overworld or be able to chop trees down? There's a few nailed-on inclusions like Fly or Flying Pokemon being used to soar above the world and to the top of mountains, and needing some aquatic Pokemon to be able to cross large stretches of water, but it'll be interesting to see how deep Game Freak go with this idea. When I think how I'd want this open world Pokemon game to be realised, I'd want a lot of the barriers put up by previous games to be broken down, and for Pokemon to really lean into this more open style of exploration and battling. No idea what they're going to do with battling, but it looks like it's still turn-based. Maybe weather effects will be more predictable if you're exploring a sandy desert in the middle of a sandstorm or fighting hail off in a blizzard. Weather mattered a lot in that other Nintendo open world game, so I'd be surprised if Game Freak let this opportunity slip. Yes, I want lightning strikes to weaken the legendary Pokemon that I'm fighting. That sounds fucking amazing! Although, perhaps my biggest and most important request for Pokemon Legends Arceus is being able to do what you want in any order. This may well be a given in any open world setting, but the one major change that Pokemon is yet to test out and fully commit to is fighting gym leaders in any order. There have been a few hints of this in the past, like how in Johto you can do the 5th, 6th and 7th gyms in any order, and how a fair few of the Kanto gyms can be done in any order, but if this new open world game wants to do this properly, I'm gonna need 8 gyms that can be fought in whatever order you like. I hate to keep making comparisons, but Breath of the Wild gave you 4 Divine Beasts to rescue in whatever order took your fancy, so it's definitely possible, but Pokemon is an RPG with levels and experience. Giving the player free choice means you gotta balance how strong some gym leaders are out of order. That's why you use a bit of level scaling, so that each gym challenge has a different number of Pokemon, all at different levels, depending on how many badges you have. That is, if Legends Arceus even has a typical gym leader structure, but the starters are the same types as usual, so hopefully they've got something like this in mind. I really do think that fighting gyms in different orders with a different starter Pokemon for every playthrough that you fancy doing, it could help this game have more replayability than any previous game in the series. You could have a completely different experience to everyone else who plays it, and again, if we're really committing to this open world idea, this might be the way to go. I want to exercise a bit of caution though, because Pokemon Legends Arceus is the sort of game where one small bit of news from the dev team, either positive or negative, could be blown wildly out of proportion. It is fun to speculate about what this game could be and what it could do for a franchise that has begun to slow down in recent times, but there's also every chance that this is the start of a spin-off franchise that won't hold any real ramifications for the future of Pokemon. Or it could be a strange mix of the two, where Game Freak put some of their most creative ideas on the board and blend it all together for one very different Pokemon game, and simply hold the door open for more titles. No great pressure on Legends Arceus to be the next big thing for Pokemon, but keeping a keen eye out for ideas that can be carried over for the next big step. It is important to keep expectations in check though, since there's no use predicting the perfect game and getting upset when few ideas are carried over into reality. But it is healthy to have these expectations and to have something to look forward to. How do you unite the Pokemon fanbase? Give them hope. Hi, just want to give a quick shout out to some of my top supporters on Patreon. We have Ramon Alberto, Jerome Kiryu, Fusion Warrior, Sarah Malion, Christopher Robinson, Joe Creamer, and Scott Riker. Thank you all for supporting what I do on YouTube, and if you want to join them, you can go to patreon.com/RabbidLuigi, where I post updates and behind the scenes stuff, and we generally have a really good time. Also, what topic would you like to see me cover next? Leave your suggestion in a comment on this video, because I'll be taking the best ideas and making a poll on my community tab, which you can then vote on to decide what the next video is about. I'll be announcing the winner of the poll over on my Twitter, so make sure you follow me so you don't miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.